what is the best way to deal with a breakup from a long-term relationship? Okay. Well, this is the kind of feelings that come up when you break up. Long-term relationship is a sense of feelings of grief and separation, and these are very similar to what happens if someone close to you dies. Someone dies from you, or your relationship dies. So it's a matter of death and change. In put in purely Dhamma point of view, that as meditators and as practitioners of Dhamma, what we're seeking to do is to look at life more closely and more directly, and seeing in very small everyday affairs this constant change and arising and passing away and coming together and separating. And so when you open your eyes to what's going on moment by moment in your life, you're seeing separation again and again and again. Many, many times every day you're experiencing some kind of separation. So in this way it's similar to a kind of an inoculation. So when you experience the more serious kinds of separation from someone you love, or either through a divorce, or through ending of a relationship, or through death, then it's not something that's going to knock you over altogether and completely overpower you, because it's just more of the same thing. It's the same kind of thing. It's just a more powerful kind of thing, of the same style. In relationships, there are healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships, and love is only one part, I think, of a healthy and mature relationship. And sometimes there are some very unhealthy and unwise attitudes and habits that arise in relationships, which you overlook as long as relationships is going well, but then they come to the fore. They become more obvious when things get more difficult. And if we have very overly romantic ideas about love, then we're setting ourselves up for some serious suffering when things do change. Apart from the loss, of the love and the major changes that leads to in your life and your daily schedule and everything, the part of ego and sense of self plays a part, doesn't it? If when someone leaves you, then even if one part of you thinks that was probably in the long run the best thing that could happen, in the short run that sense of hurt and rejection, and that the person you love or have loved loves somebody else more than you and prefers to spend time with them more than you, that's the kind of the knife, isn't it? The poison knife, that's the worst thing. So, to look and to be able to distinguish between the suffering from separation and loss of the loved one and that sense of rejection and the hurt of being rejected in favor of somebody else, and to see, to what extent that's coming from a sense of self. Now, if you become very lazy in a relationship and you overlook your own mental, spiritual development, then you just rely on the other person, particularly if the other person is stronger than you in some way. So you just use the other person as a kind of a crutch and just depend on them for everything. And then when you lose that person, then you're really in a bad way. This happens not just in like romantic or relationships, but I've seen this in monasteries when monks become very attached to their teacher, and when the teacher's still alive, they feel great and they feel so wonderful to have such a great teacher, and then when the teacher dies, then they realize that they've overlooked or they've been rather lazy in their own development, and a lot of the peace and the happiness that they were experiencing wasn't coming from their own practice, but was coming through living close by to someone and just sort of basking in and enjoying their parami without developing their own parami. And so in Buddhism we say life is an education. You have to be learning and moving onwards and developing all the time, and that if you find yourself in this like comfortable position, you can stagnate without realizing it, and suddenly if something changes, you realize how few inner resources you have. So the wise person doesn't rely upon anybody else for their happiness. They can receive happiness from others and give it, but not in that neurotic kind of way in which that's all there is. And so you get this very kind of clinging relationship, and the more someone clings in a relationship, becomes needy in a relationship, they usually end up pushing away the other person. It has exactly the opposite effect that they hope for. And you hold on tighter and tighter, and then that person will stay with you, and that person just wants to get away when you do that. So in the end, there's always going to be a period of sorrow and sadness and pain, but it's how you deal with that. And there are two unwise ways of dealing with the pain of separation. One is just to indulge in it and just sit and imagine all these kinds of fantasies and movies where something happens and they phone up and then it's all back how it used to be again, and everything's wonderful once more, and it could happen like this, and he says this and she says that, and it's just like in Hollywood movie, and just spending so much time regretting the past and wanting it to be back as it was. And then it just goes on and on and on. And the other way is just to try to force these kinds of feelings out of your mind, and I'm not going to think about this anymore, and then maybe you start to be very negative towards that person and just get very angry, and then want to shout and scream or run them down and say nasty things about them to somebody else. And so, these are kind of the two immature reactions to loss. It's like the indulgence in it and the anger and the negativity and just not wanting to feel like this anymore. But if you can recognize this just normal part, this is what happens when we're separated from someone we love. It's like this. This is what life's about. It's just like this. And if you're, who knows? In the long run, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, hard to say. There's a famous quote from a Chinese leader, I think it was Mao Zedong, Chu Enlai, one of these people, and at a big conference was asked, what is your opinion of the French Revolution, the results of the French Revolution? and this Chinese leader said, too soon to tell. So, the French Revolution was in 1789, and he was asked in 1960-something, and he said it's too soon to tell. And, many of you have had now in good and healthy relationships, and it's probably after finishing other relationships, sometimes in a messy and painful kind of way. So if you hadn't had that painful, messy, nasty, awful breakup with that person, you wouldn't be with the person you're with right now. So it's maineh. You see, this isn't just kind of trying to comfort yourself, but it's the truth. It's you can't tell. But there is, my advice is that you need your own inner resources. You can't look for somebody else to make up for all you lack within yourself. This idea, I'm not like this. I'm like, I'm very weak, so get someone very strong. I'm not very good like this, so I get someone like that. And the idea is these two halves come together and you make a composite whole and can sort everything out. It doesn't work like that. You've got to do this work yourself. And the more you are willing and you put this effort into this work, then the more you can contribute to relationships you're in and to make them into healthy and long-lasting relationship. But in the end, there's no guarantees of anything. How you are and your values, and when you're 20, and when you're 25, and when you're 30, and when you're 35, you can have, young man and young woman have, very close in the way they look at the world, in their values, so many things when they're 20, but by the time they're 25 or 30, maybe they've started to go in different direction. This kind of thing can happen. So it's my opinion that I've seen many very unhappy couples who really love each other, and I've seen couples that get on very well and have very successful relationships that don't love each other so much. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't think love is just such the answer to everything. It's one thing, so it can be a good thing, but it's not everything. Okay. How can we constantly live in the present while we always have to make plans for the future? The teaching of living in the present moment is not one in which we overlook or neglect the importance of the past or the future. So in any kind of situation, we have a part to play, then we are having to draw upon memory. If we have some challenge in our studies or in our work, then we need to draw upon things that we've learned in the past experiences, and so on. There's no question about that. Similarly, we have to make wise decisions about how to prioritize our objectives and what to do first, what to do later, what's important, what's not important. So, and we're traveling somewhere, then obviously even arahants have to get a plane ticket before the plane leaves. Otherwise it would be a very difficult situation. So it's just common sense, isn't it, that being in the present moment doesn't mean this sort of timeless present moment. That's an experience, and a wonderful experience that may come during meditation and will give a whole new perspective, dimension to our understanding of the nature of time. But in the conventional world, in everyday life, what it means is we're not uselessly, needlessly dwelling on the past or the future. So if so much of our mental activity is spent going over and over and over things in the past without any benefit at all to the present moment and our responsibilities and our duties and whatever we want to do, is that this habit, if we get a little bit depressed or sad, maybe just think of some good memory just to cheer us up, or even much more damagingly, if you have had some argument or some pain in the past, and we're talking about separation from a loved one just now, or some argument, and you just go over and over and over again, round and round and round and round. It's like having a meal from last week. Just imagine if you got, you had some food from last week and it's all going sort of cold and mouldy and sticky, and you started to eat that, again, food from a week ago. How disgusting is that? But that's what we do mentally, just go over these old memories again and again and again and again. It's an addiction, and it doesn't contribute anything to the quality of our life at all. So when we're saying being in the present moment, what we're trying to let go of is that habit of allowing past experiences and memories from taking over our mind. Similarly with the future, we're talking about what we have to deal with, and a good way of looking at it is what is urgent and important. Urgent, not important, important, not urgent, not important, and not urgent. And then we can say, well, we try and do what's important and urgent first, and what is unimportant and not urgent last. And then between the second and the third one, most people make the mistake of doing what is urgent or doan before what is important or samkhan. But the wise person, many cases, will do what is important but not doan first, because otherwise we just get stressed out, and often we spend a lot of time telling ourselves, we've got to do this, got to do that, got to do this, got to finish that. And really what for? Not very much at all. And really important things which have long-term benefits, because there's not time pressure, we don't give them enough importance. So we're deluded, or we're manipulated by a sense of time pressure to do a lot of quite unnecessary, pointless things, and important things which for our long-lasting benefit, but which don't have any kind of social pressure, time pressure on us, we neglect. And so obviously example of that is meditation practice. You don't meditate, no one's going to tell you off, no one's going to get on your back, and you think, I'll do this, it's more important to get this finished first and do that, and then maybe sometime I'll do that. And of course you never get round to it. So the future is, and the past, what are they right now in your experience? The past is a memory, and the future is thought. So when you're dealing with the past and the future, what you're actually dealing with is presently arising memory and presently arising thought. So you're always in the present moment anyway. You can't escape the present moment. But it's a matter of recognizing that you're dealing with thoughts about the future, and you're dealing with memories of the past. And you realize what you're doing. There's that sense of self-awareness. Is it wrong to be ambitious? everyone wants to be successful materialistically, whether it's for their own sake or to fulfill their parents' desires. Yeah, I don't think people are ambitious enough. I think people are too easily satisfied in their life. I think people... I would say that if you think just making a lot of money and being famous and successful in your career, I think that's a very unambitious attitude to life. I think you should be far more ambitious and consider the spiritual dimension of life, as it's pretty kind of narrow, miserable kind of goal if you're only looking at it in materialistic parameters. But on the materialistic level, there's no idealization of poverty in Buddhism at all. Poor people are not more spiritually rich than rich people. The question is how you live your life and how you pursue success, what you consider success to be. So in the Buddhist, you want to be successful, you want to be top of the tree in your particular profession, so on, fine, no problem. But do it in an honest way. Don't cheat, don't take advantage of others, don't be corrupt, don't take shortcuts. Do it in a way that you can feel proud of yourself and that you can respect yourself and you can be respected by others. One reflection I was talking with someone the other day, given before, is what you want to be able to do is to lead your career, lead your life and pursue your career in such a way as if you have children of your own. And then your son and your daughter said, "How did you make your money? How did you pursue your success? And if you can reveal the way that you've lived your life and not have to conceal anything from your child, then I think that's one definition of success. But if you have to hide things or excuse things or justify things, and because of you're ashamed of exactly how you made all this money, then I don't think that's a worthy ambition. In the end, the word for money and things in the for Buddhist sense, we have the special word patjai. Like tawai patjai. So patjai means support. So the problem with money is that we forget that money is a support. It's a means to an end. And the problem comes when money becomes an end in itself. So if you want to accumulate lots of money, well, that's no problem with that. But what for? So the Buddha says, one, you should accumulate wealth, called pokasap, in an honest, ethical way with integrity. But once you have accumulated money, you need to use it to bring happiness and benefit to yourself, and also happiness and benefit to your family, the people around you, and to be able to create and contribute to the well-being of your community, the society in which you live in, and also to contribute to the well-being and the progress of the religion that you uphold. So, saying, make as much money as you want, but be clear why exactly. If it just becomes an end to itself, and you sometimes feel, I've got all this money in the bank, and I've got 2 houses or 3 houses, and I've got this kind of car and that kind of car. That's a kind of pretty low, miserable, narrow kind of ambition. But if you're accumulating wealth in an honest way, and you're using that wealth in a really constructive way for yourself, your family, your community, society, for the sasana, then that's a wonderful thing. And then the more money you have, then the more good things you can do, and the more happiness you can create, and the more benefit you can create. What are your thoughts about the riots which are going on around the world, especially in England and the Middle East? Well, so I'm not an expert on these matters, but as far as I understand, the riots in the Middle East and the riots in England are of a quite different nature. The riots in the Middle East are predominantly political protests against the prevailing political system, calling for more democracy, more participation, more justice in society. The riots that have been taking place in England the past week or two are not political, not overtly political. So there are two main ways of looking at these things, which are, as I most simply put, is the left-wing and the right-wing view. So the left-wing view is that these kinds of riots are basically the expressions of frustration from the poorer people in society who feel excluded, and is a response to huge cuts in welfare spending and for the welfare of poorer people. And the people, yes, a lot of kind of repressed anger, sense of injustice and exclusion, which is just looking for a trigger. The right-wing view would be that parents are not bringing up children properly, they're not disciplining their children. There's a huge problem with single-parent families, with majority of children growing up without a father in the house, lacking good male role models, father role models. There's no sense of community. So the right-wing view would be sort of putting things on personal responsibility, and the left-wing view more on social conditions. So I would say myself, there's probably a bit of both, and various things contributing. But I think that in a society in which, again, people have very naive and unsophisticated understanding of the nature of happiness and suffering, and when most people consider happiness to be a function of consumption, then if your society is one in which you're telling everybody that you can only be somebody, you can only really be happy, you can only really be fulfilled if you have this, if you possess that, if you consume this, and then you have large numbers of people who feel that there's no way they're ever going to be able to consume those things, then you're going to have problems and violence every now and again. So in one sense it's the value system of the society, and I think there are huge problems in the ways that in the family structure these days, but also there is in Buddhist economics and the Buddhist teachings on the responsibilities of governments and kings, then it's clear that the Buddha felt that in a very unjust economic system in which there's a huge gap in wealth between the rich and the poor, then the king in those days or governments do have a role in trying to help the poorest members of society. And so that would imply a system of taxation and social welfare programs. I think that would be in harmony with the teachings that appear in the Pali Canon, in the Tipitaka. I was speaking on the phone with my mother, and she was telling me there was a student, a 21-year-old student, who'd never had no criminal record. He's in London, and he'd been visiting his girlfriend, and he was walking home, and he was thirsty, and they were breaking into the shop, and so, why not? So he just took a couple of bottles of water. So the price of maybe about £3 or something. And he got caught, and he got given 4 months in prison. So he's going to have a criminal record, 4 months in prison for taking a couple of bottles of water. So you can see that, just that moment, that just how subtle that is. I mean, that wasn't like a really real bap in his mind, it wasn't really something terrible, but just that lack of integrity, and just that little thought of something for nothing, that's all it takes. And you think, nobody's going to catch me, this is not going to, it's just water, it's nothing. And, it's 4 months in prison. There are other young men, given 8 months and 9 months for stealing a pair of trainers and things like that. So, there's a lot to reflect on that situation, and but the one point is to make about bap. You think bap is we have this. It's like to make really bad karma. It's got to be like a really big deal. But if you consider modern warfare these days, and how in the richer countries like America, where they have such advanced technologies, where you can kill large numbers of people basically playing a computer game. You don't have to have any kind of contact with the people that you're killing. All you're doing is looking at a screen and pressing a button. And so you could kill large numbers of people and have at that moment, no subjective kind of sense of shame or horror or realization of what you've done. What would you feel? You just see a screen and you see a target, and it's no different from all the video games you've been playing since you were a kid. So it's not to say that when you make really important choices in your life, or when you do something which is going to have really long-term consequences, at that moment you feel like, this is a really big deal. You might just think it's nothing, and so that's again why I'm stressing this importance of mindfulness and having boundaries and having standards that you set for yourself, not something that someone's telling you to do, or you feel you're forced to not do this and not do that, but you say, this is how far I go, this is my standard, this is my boundary, and I keep within that boundary whatever other people are doing, whatever else people say is the latest fashion, the latest style, everyone's doing it, and so on and so forth. You have to have your own integrity. That's the only way you can really survive in the ethical and spiritual sense.